Good morning. I want to apologize real quick that the background is not very bookish today. We just finished doing morning time for our homeschool day, and it's Friday fun day, so I'm letting the kids play for an hour, and then we're going to come back and do some more fun subjects today in our homeschool, so that should be good. But I want to try to film this quick, and this is the best place in the house to try to do it. So anyway, today I wanted to share the books that I read in February. I read 9 books in February, which I was really pleased with, and I did not expect to be able to read that much in such a short month, but I finished a lot of books. So the first one I finished was called Nevermore, and this is a middle grade kind of fantastical storybook, and the premise is that there's a girl named Morgan Crow who is a cursed child in this universe, and all the cursed children get killed on the eve of their 11th birthday. They just mysteriously die. And so her 11th birthday is approaching, but instead of dying, she is whisked away to this other realm called Nevermore, where she has to compete to enter the Wonder Society so that she can legally stay in Nevermore. So it was very cute, very interesting, very fantastical and out there. So I really liked it. I thought it was quirky and fun. Since it is a middle grade book, I will make a note that I would not, it's not a book I probably would just hand to my kids at this time. Maybe when they're a little bit older, I might consider giving it to my kids to read, but the reason is that I like to be a little bit careful about books that have sympathetic creatures that are typically, stereotypically evil. So this book had a melodramatic vampire who is lovable, and like I said, as an adult I thought it was quirky and fun, but until my kids' worldviews are a little bit more established and we've got real strong good and evil kind of sense here, I like to be a little careful about mixing like I said, kind of more morally ambiguous characters that are traditionally evil. So that's just my preference, but I thought I'd make a note of that in case anybody else has similar preference. But other than that, I think it'd be fun to read with my kids when they're older, and I enjoyed it as an adult. So that was a good one. Next book I read was called In Cheap We Trust, and I don't love the name because it seems a little bit sacrilegious to me, but I thought the topic of this book sounded really interesting, and I'm glad I picked it up. It's about the attitudes of Americans toward frugality through our history. So I thought it was really interesting. I've been trying to read more about frugality just because I want to be a little bit more frugal myself. This book didn't have so much tips on how to be frugal, but it was really interesting to kind of see the history of where we started, how frugality has been tied into patriotism over the centuries, and how we're kind of away from that now because Americans are very much in debt, very much spend more than we should, more than our means allow, and how it kind of has brought us to this point. Okay, the next one I read was Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, and this was a memoir written by a therapist, kind of about her journey in getting therapy herself during a time when she was going through some difficult things in her life. So I thought this was a really interesting kind of behind the scenes look at how the world of therapy works. I've never done therapy, but I found it really fascinating to see how they went about helping their clients, and just the whole thing was very interesting to me. I didn't agree with everything she said, but like I said, the behind the scenes look was just fascinating to me. Okay, next book I read was called America's Expiration Date, and this was written from a Christian conservative perspective. So I just want to say that in case you want to know that. But it was basically about how throughout history, a lot of different empires either were over or started to decline by around the 250-year mark, and kind of talking about why that is, and how, as America is approaching our 250th birthday, how we can maybe avoid some of these things that have brought these other empires down, if that makes sense. So it was like the first, maybe 2/3 of it was mainly just history, which was really interesting to see kind of the big picture of different empires through history like that. And then the last couple of chapters I found really personally encouraging as a Christian, just because he's talking about how Christians can seek the good of the country that we're in, and be civic minded, but how ultimately our eyes should be on eternity and serving the Lord in the midst of no matter what's happening in our culture. So anyway, I thought it was very encouraging. I found it really encouraging just as a Christian on different ideas of what we can do to seek the good of our country. So definitely check it out if you're interested in that sort of thing at all. And I also just wanted to mention right here that I am doing Chantel at An Intentional Life. I'm doing her Read Your Bookshelf Challenge for this year. And in January, I forgot to mention it, but I did read a book with a home word in the title, which was The Lake House. And the next book, I have my paper right here I'm referencing. The next challenge was to read a book with red on the cover or spine. And this one fit in with that because it had a red spine. So that's what I'm writing in for that. Okay, next book I listened to actually was called Woman in the Window. And this was like a thriller. And basically the premise is that there's a woman who suffers from agoraphobia and she sees a murder and she's trying to let the police know and trying to solve it from not being able to leave her house. So it was an interesting premise and that's what kept me listening to it. But overall, I would say it was just okay. It wasn't like amazing to me. It's not one I would say definitely read it just because it had a little bit more bad language in it than I typically like in books that I recommend. So it was just okay. The next one I read was called The Bride of Pendrick. And this one was definitely similar to like a Daphne du Maurier kind of book. So more of that gothic vibe to it. So the premise of this one is that there's a young bride who gets married, is taken to her husband's estate, but there's a mystery associated with the estate because the estate is supposedly haunted by a previous bride of Pendrick. The current ghost in the manor is trying to be replaced by a new ghost so that she can be at peace. So the new bride of Pendrick is in danger of dying, basically. So it was definitely like gothic kind of vibes. They're trying to figure out what exactly is going on. There's danger and all that. But the ending was very much not expected to me at all. So I thought it was really good. I would recommend it. And yeah. Okay, the next one I listened to was called The Sun Does Shine, and this is about a man who was falsely accused of murder and put on death row, and just his experiences in the justice system and on death row. So I didn't agree with everything he said, but I thought that it was really interesting to see how he encouraged the other death row inmates and kind of brought them hope and changed the whole atmosphere of death row. I found that really fascinating. I thought I was really interested in kind of the prison aspect and what it would be like to be in prison, and I thought it was very interesting to hear his explanation of the environment and everything. Okay, next book that I listened to was Raising Grateful Kids in an Entitled World, and this book was one my book group with some friends of mine decided we wanted to try a nonfiction book. And this is the one that was picked. So this is like a self-help / parenting sort of book. And if you've watched my previous wrap-ups over the last couple months, you know that I have very mixed feelings about these two genres of books. And I'm very picky about the ones that I like. So this book was, like I said, the topic was to try to avoid raising entitled children. And I thought she did have some good things to say on that subject, but also they were mostly things that to me were pretty common sense. They fit in with the way my parents raised me and the way I'm already trying to raise my kids. So I didn't get very much out of this book that was something new that I had thought about. And I also had a little bit of a problem with some of the stories that she shared. I felt like some of them were just too personal, and maybe she should have kept them a little more vague. But anyway, so it wasn't my favorite book. Let's just say that. Like I said, I'm very picky about these two genres, and this one was not one that would top my list of ones that I like. Okay, and then the last book I read was The Hound of Baskervilles, and I read this using the Serial app, which Chantel mentioned the other day, and I really like the Serial app. I've been trying to tell people about it myself because basically it takes classic books that are in the public domain and splits them into 10-minute reading increments and delivers a chunk to you every day to read. So it's really a manageable way to read those classics that might be a little bit more intimidating to you. And that's how I read this one. So I really enjoyed The Hound of Baskervilles. I thought it was really interesting to see just a different classic mystery author. I read a lot of Agatha Christie, but to see how Conan Doyle wove his mysteries together and his detective and his quirks, it was interesting to see how some of it was similar to some of the Agatha Christie books that I like, and how some of it was its own flavor. So I really enjoyed it. I like mysteries in general, and this was a good one. So that is it. I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss talking about any of these, but nope, that's it. That's what I read in February, and I'm in the midst of middle grade March, trying to read some middle grade books. So hopefully I'll have another good wrap up with lots of books to talk about in a couple weeks. So I hope you're all having a good afternoon, and I'm going to try to edit this and get it up before we move on and do more school. So, all right, have a good day. Bye.